Today I'm going to be doing a long-term review of the Acaia scales. I bought my first Acaia scale, which was the Acaia Pearl, about 5 years ago, and since then, shortly after, I bought the Acaia Cinco, and then I bought the Acaia Lunar about 2 years ago. So these ranged have been about 5 to 2 years, all used pretty heavily and pretty regularly, and I'm excited to share my thoughts with them to you today. But before we do that, if you could please like and subscribe, that really helps me produce more content. You can follow me on Instagram at Kabin's Coffee Corner. And if you're looking at purchasing these, please use the link below. I'll make a small commission at no extra charge to you, and that helps me fund this channel. So first off, I bought the Acaia Pearl scale about 5 years ago. And the reason I bought the Acaia Pearl scale was because I had a pretty inconsistent, cheap $10 scale, and it was just getting frustrated when I was starting to get into the espresso journey. So I would end up weighing out 18 grams of coffee, and it would change every single time I picked it up, even though I knew exactly what was in there. So that ended up completely dying. I spilled some water on it, so then I figured I need to actually get a real scale, and I decided to get the Acaia Pearl and haven't looked back since. It's been a great scale. It's been holding up very, very long. My only main complaint is the fact that it has a micro USB port on it. They've since changed that to USB-C, and they've also changed the Acaia Lunar to USB-C as well. But overall, this is a great scale for pour overs, or right now I typically have it sitting on my coffee station, and it's for dosing out for my single dosing grinders. I don't typically do pour overs too much, but it's nice to have it when I do. The next one I bought is one that is no longer in existence, but they actually changed it a little bit, and that is the Acaia Pyxis, or the Acaia Cinco. The Cinco is the 5-year anniversary of Acaia, so this was a limited edition run that I was privileged to get and purchase 5 years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, give or take. And since then, they've changed it, and it's now in a black colorway. And the case that it comes in, which this case is a nice magnetic little case here, they've since changed it to a plastic case instead of metal. Not a big deal. It still comes with a case, so that is nice. And it is micro USB, and I don't believe they've changed that to USB-C or anything like that. It definitely can't hold as much. It's definitely way more compact. And this comes in about $270 for the Pyxis now, versus the $150 for the Acaia Pearl. And lastly, I have my most recent purchase, which was back in 2020, so maybe 3 years old now. Man, time flies. But this is the Acaia Lunar scale, and this scale is basically made for more espresso-based drinks, so it's a little bit more water resistance. I don't know if they claim it as waterproof, but it does a very, very good job of not having to worry when steam comes up through your drip tray, when an OPV valve opens up and hot water comes through and it kind of steams up. So the bottom of this gets very wet, and I haven't had any issue with this. They've since changed some of these like little accessories in it. So this little rubber pad is now a circle rubber pad, and this little rubber pad is, I don't know if this is the same or not, but these work great as little tamping mats that you can put on the side of things. You can flip it upside down, and it helps balance the portafilter a little easier on this. These come with a variety of accessories that you can purchase, like a portafilter weighing plate that magnetically sticks on the top of it. You can buy a $50 hard shell case for this thing, soft hard shell case thing, to travel with it, and a few other things I think on their website. The one thing I didn't really like about this one is there's some little rubber feet on it that requires you to place them on there. And I just think that should be standard with these. I think it should be just rubberized on the bottom and have a little different options of what to do with that. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold. But I want to go over a little bit of the sides things, which one I would buy again, which one I maybe wouldn't buy again, which one I would buy first, and if I regret these purchases. So first off, we're going to go with sizes, and I got three different things here to kind of help you get an idea of what these look like, because I spent a lot of time figuring that out. Obviously, the Cinco and the Pyxis is the smallest of the three. If you put a 58 millimeter tamper from Barista Hustle on her, it covers up most of the screen actually when you put it on there, so it's really not much bigger and wider than the 58 millimeter tamper. If you take a not neutral Lino mug, I think, and put it on there, you can fit the entire mug on there and still see the screen, so when you're pulling a shot of espresso, it works pretty well. You can see the screen. If you put I believe this is an 8-cup Chemex, if you put that on there, it doesn't work very well at all, and it covers the entire thing. When it comes to the lunar scale, I'm going to move this little place off here. You got that 58 millimeter tamper with plenty of room to spare. You have your not neutral cup, again, plenty of room to spare on that one as well. And then you have your Chemex, which you can still kind of see the screen if you balance the Chemex right on the edge, and still probably make a pour over with it. But if you're putting it on the center, it's going to cover up the screen and then some. If you put this on, this is a larger Chemex, by the way. I think it's 8 or 10 cups. It's really dusty and really old, and it sits as decor in my house. This one does cover up the screen, but it definitely fits more comfortable on the Acaia Pearl Scale. The Acaia Pearl Scale, I believe, comes in a couple different colors. One of the newer colors that they have is all black, and you can maybe kind of see here, it's kind of like a little clear on the sides here, and they've kind of changed that to all black. Since then, it has gotten a little scratched up over time. I mean, it still looks in pretty decent condition. This has the rubberized bottom on it. So when I look at the way I purchased these and knowing how expensive these are and knowing that the scale market has increased and gotten way better, there's more options now than there were 5 years ago when I started purchasing scales. But I decided to go with Acaia because this is what everybody uses in competitions, and this is like the go-to top-of-the-line scale, and I bought it because I knew I would never have to replace it. I knew I would never have to upgrade from it, or at least it would be a very long time. And it's panned out for 5 years. I still have not had to upgrade it. They have some new features on the newer ones, not needing enough to upgrade it. It is incredibly consistent. It has an app that you'll never probably really use. I don't really know anybody that does. It's got some cool features and stuff on it. You don't really use it a ton in my sake for any of these. However, when it comes to purchasing a scale, depending on where you're at in your journey, if you're never planning on getting an espresso, I would do the Pearl, of course, because it's just the biggest and it's the easiest to kind of put any kind of carafe or pour over vessel on it. If you might be getting into espresso and you currently do pour over and you're starting your journey and you just want to get a one and done scale, I would do the Lunar, because I have made full carafes of coffee on this thing. It holds the same weight capacity as the Pearl, and this is the time that I use the app. If I'm using a big enough carafe and I only have this scale with me, I will pull open my phone and use the app, and that app will then show me how much liquid is in the cup, and I can see everything in very, very quick time on my phone with very little delay. So I can cover up the screen and it doesn't really matter. Same with the Acaia Cinco or the Acaia Pixis. This is, for obvious reasons, my travel scale because it's the smallest. It's incredibly consistent. It goes to the 100th of a gram rather than the 10th of the gram of the other two. And this does an incredible job of being consistent, and for the most part I can pull AeroPress things on it and make AeroPress with this, or I'll even use it for pour over, and it's just incredibly small, compact travel scale, and it works well if you use the app with it, and it comes with a case, so it's almost a no-brainer for me for travel. But I would not necessarily recommend dropping $270 on a scale for travel. It's not needed. You can buy a cheap one that could easily break or easily be replaced for like 15 bucks on Amazon. Don't need that for travel, and I'm not advocating it. But for a one and done scale for every single need, if you buy the Lunar, you buy the travel case for it at 50 bucks, and then you're going to be hitting about 275 bucks for the entire bundle. I think that's going to give you incredible results for anything you do. If you ever get into espresso, if you want to do pour over, or if you do pour over a lot, you can balance it well enough to see the screen. And if I look back on my journey, I would have just started with the Lunar. I don't really find a need in my life, because I don't do a ton of pour overs, to use the Acaia Pearl. It's a great scale, there's nothing wrong with it. I wish I would have rather bought 2 Lunars instead of the Acaia Pearl, mainly because I have kind of 2 areas of coffee from doing all this YouTube stuff. So I have a full-fledged bar at my work, and I have a full-fledged bar at home. So I have these 3 scales to go through between these. If you're looking to do pour over, I'm gonna say this, and hopefully people won't get too upset, is consistency isn't as important as it is in an espresso. It's still important, it's still good to have the exact results, but if you go a couple grams over on your water when you're pouring a pour over, or if you're like a couple tenths of a gram off, it will be okay, and it will still be a good cup of coffee. When it comes to espresso, being a couple tenths of a gram off or it being inconsistent is a problem, and it will be very, very frustrating when it comes to espresso. So that's why I'd always maybe aim spending more on an espresso scale than spending more on a pour over scale. If you do occasional pour overs, go buy a $30 or $40 scale. There's a ton of different options under the $100 mark for scales nowadays. And when it comes to espresso, buying the Akai Lunar is expensive, but it's a purchase that I don't personally regret. And this was like easily the one, when I bought the Cinco 5 years ago, it was easily the most expensive coffee product I had. I was pulling shots on a $200 Breville grinder, and I used a Flair Classic at the time. That was basically my setup. So $200 grinder that I think I even bought used, and then a $150, $60 machine. So I spent $100 more on my scale than I did my machine. I knew I was gonna upgrade my machines, and I knew I was gonna grow in this, and I knew I didn't wanna continue, like this was one thing I knew that I wouldn't need to upgrade. And I feel like if I would have bought any other scale, I would have regretted it in the long run because of how nice these look and how well they work. And when it comes to Akaya's customer service, I have no idea how good they are because I've never had a problem with any of these 3 scales and never had a reason to contact them for anything. And that just says a lot about how well these are built. This scale has gone all over the US with me when I've traveled. It's been thrown around, it's been backpacks and luggage. These have been not as heavy use as like what you'd see in a cafe. Cafes use these things and they last a long time and they work incredibly well. I would highly recommend, if you're in the scale for a market, just to save a little bit of extra money, probably the Akai Lunar, and you'll be set for a long time. And I don't think you'll regret the purchase if you're into coffee and you really want to grow with it. If you're just starting off and you don't ever really plan on getting too far with it, maybe buy a $20 scale and you'll be all right. The build quality and the consistency of these things are top of the line, and you're never really going to get better than these, to my knowledge, with anything coming up. There's still good scales, but these are just great looking and great functioning, and it's something that's worth having on your coffee counter. So if you have any questions on these scales, I'd love to answer those for you, but I've been using all these for 2 to 5 years, somewhere in there. Great with no problems, and I'd highly recommend them. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching.